We're here for the purpose of the regular meeting of the Elmhurst City Council. I'd like to invite Cub Scout Pack, I'm going to get this right. I think we got Weeblo's 4th and 5th grade Cub Scouts from Pack 15, my alma mater, Jefferson, and Pack 17, Jackson? Jackson, all right, come on up, guys. You're going to help lead us in the pledge. Oh, all rise, and then these guys are going to lead us in the pledge. The guys come over here. Right about there. All right, now I'll line up right there and face the flag. All right, we're going to take it from you guys.
Join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great job.
Thanks, guys.
Clerk Cyprian, I'd ask you to call the roll.
Levin,
Here.
Park,
Here.
Conquest,
Here.
Kennedy,
Here.
Mulliner,
Here.
Brennan,
Here.
Sabatino,
Here.
Ryder,
Here.
Dunn,
Here.
Leader,
Here.
Chomsky,
Here.
Graham,
Here.
Toledo, absent, York,
Here.
13 present, 1 absent.
13 present, 1 absent. We have a quorum. On to agenda item 3, written communication. Is there anyone in the audience who has any written communication they wish to submit? Written communication from the public. If you have any written communication, please raise your hand so I can identify you. Seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item 4, public forum. This is an opportunity for anybody in the audience to address the council on any issue they so choose. We ask that you direct your comments to the chairman, which is me. We also ask, out of respect for work that we have to get done here this evening and respect for others that may want to speak, that you keep your comments to 3 minutes. If you go over 3 minutes, I'll give you a gentle reminder, and I'll ask you to wrap up. Clerk Spencer, Clerk Cyprian, at this time, has anybody signed up for public forum?
Yes, Mayor Morley, we have 2 people that signed up.
Okay, before the clerk calls your name, I will remind you that we are recording this. I ask that when you get to the microphone, you state your name for the record. Address is optional. Take it away.
John Quigley,
Good evening. John Quigley, President and CEO of the Elmhurst Chamber of Commerce and Industry. While attending the December 10 Development Planning and Zoning Committee meeting regarding item 6.14 on your consent agenda tonight, I poorly characterized the committee's decision as being poorly made. So at this time, I want to apologize to Committee Chair Mike Conquest, Vice Chair Noel Toledo, and Member Mark Mulliner, as well as attending city staff members, for my regretted utterance. Thank you.
Okay.
Kathleen Sullivan,
Kathleen Sullivan. Another year's gone by, and just wanted to thank you for all the continued progress that's been made in the area of stormwater mitigation here in Elmhurst. This year you have 2 projects, one just about to complete in January and one already completed, that will probably double the number of homes that are protected from flooding, and the residents who are protected by that, as well as the ones who can drive through streets that aren't flooded as well, appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, that's it for public forum for those who signed up. Is there anyone in the audience who did not have an opportunity to sign up on our sign-in sheet but wishes to address the council at this time? If so, please raise your hand. Seeing none, that concludes public forum for this evening. Agenda item 5, announcements. Any announcements from the dais? No announcements. On to agenda item 6, consent agenda. At this time, is there any item on the consent agenda any alderman wishes to see removed, to provide additional comment, or vote no? Alderman Deuter.
Item 6.14.
6.14. Anyone else? Alderman Bram.
6.38.
6.38. 6.14 and 6.38. Anyone else? Seeing none, I will now entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda, minus items 6.14 and 6.38. Motion by Alderman Brennan, second by Alderman Honquist. Clerk Cyprian.
Levin.
Aye.
Park.
Aye.
Conquest.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Brennan.
Aye.
Sabatino.
Aye.
Deuter.
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
Palomski.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Toledo, absent. York.
Aye.
13 ayes, 0 nays, 1 absent.
13 ayes, 0 nays. Motion carries. Consent agenda minus items 6.14 and 6.38 is approved. On to agenda item 6.14. It's a report of DP&Z. I would ask Clerk Cyprian to read the recommendation.
Therefore, the Development, Planning, and Zoning Committee recommends that the City Council approve a $70,000 TIF incentive for TIF-eligible costs to include demolition of the existing structure for the development of a new Culver's Restaurant at 436 North York Street. The city attorney is hereby directed to prepare the necessary documents for City Council approval. Signed, Michael Honquist, Chairman, Noel Toledo, Vice Chairman, and Mark A. Mulliner.
Okay, to put this before council, I'll ask for a motion to approve the report and recommendation as read. Motion by Alderman Honquist, second by Alderman Mulliner. Alderman Honquist, your report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tonight, we are asking for the council's support for a incentive request for Culver's, which is looking at a new location where there's currently a Burger King on North York. The plan, as you could see in the report, is for them to remove and redevelop that entire property with a new restaurant. For those of you familiar with, or not familiar with Culver's, they've been growing quickly in the Midwest. They've been around since 1984. They run a very successful restaurant chain. They've never had a franchise/restaurant fail. So they take great care in the restaurants that they build and support and the franchisees they work with. So this franchisee has been looking at Elmhurst for many years and finally found this site. They came before us, if you recall, probably about a month ago for a sign variation that was in congruence with the Culver's requirements, which we all granted. And then going back to the fall, they had also requested some TIF assistance for this particular lot. So the ask originally was for $145,000 of a roughly $3.8 million project. The incentive rationale behind that was by and large to help with the return on investment from roughly 5% to about 7% round numbers that they were leveraging with their bank. So we had a very, I'll say, not necessarily spirited discussion, but a pretty intense discussion on the amount of money, the reason for the money, and the situation that was before us at that particular location. And so some of the thinking behind it, first off, we did not agree as a committee to the full ask. What we did do is go through, as you would expect, what was deliberately put together in the incentive plans as a city council we've put forth in all the TIF areas, in particular this one. And as you saw in the report, there was 3: attracting, retaining, or expanding a business, desirable businesses that we'd like to bring to an underserved business segment, and then obviously the present of extraordinary development, redevelopment costs, such as, but not limited to, remodeling, environmental remediation, capital purchases, et cetera, which also included demolition. So as we discussed those items and what we thought was reasonable for this ask, we looked at really those 3 main areas. We looked at Culver's. Would it be an attractive business that we want to bring to town? Absolutely. The fast casual concept that they bring is something that's a bit unique. We have a couple of restaurants like that, but as you guys are, as we've talked about restaurants before, you actually get a freshly made sandwich or dinner at Culver's, and then if you dine in, they will deliver it to your table. So it's a little bit different than, it's not just fast food, and then it's obviously not a full-service restaurant. So it kind of fits that particular area, and that is a growing area kind of throughout the country. And then obviously we looked at what we have there today, which is basically a bankrupt business on a lot that's not very attractive. So in discussing both the criteria and what the business was asking for, we settled on demolition costs. And as we looked at it, both in the improvement of the lot from a property tax perspective, but then obviously, you know, what we all tend to look at, a job-creating business that's also going to develop and generate sales tax for the city. And the estimate sales tax right now is roughly $70,000 a year. So as we discussed those items, we had discussion with the applicant himself, the thought process around the ask in the area. And I think a lot of you, both in just short discussions and phone calls I received today, are all asking, does this business really need the money? And I'd like to stop and ask you a couple questions. First off, if there wasn't a business coming to this lot, would you be comfortable with a $70,000 investment to clear the lot so that it was more attractive to a potentially new prospective business? Number two, if we didn't have a business already looking at this, would we be more incented to try and help a business, whatever that business is, come into that area of town? Three, does it fit with the North York plan and what we're trying to do there? And therefore, does it bring in some energy and life to that area of town, in addition to just the income via sales tax and or the improvement of the lot? So as I walked through it and I looked at it both from what our incentive program says and outlines, and what I would look at is this a good business? Is this a business we want in town? Is this going to improve the lot? And are we going to do right by the taxpayers by having this business here? We felt that going to zero and saying no sets a bad precedent. At least I'll state that for myself. I think this was a middle ground to find to provide a positive, attractive sense to a business that I think is going to be very successful here in town and is going to bring all the things we look for when we want a business to come in town, including sales tax revenue. So we all know not every business comes in town generates sales tax. So as I weighed the economic value and all the other values I've just outlined, and when we looked at a $145,000 incentive, which on a $3.7 million project is really not that outrageous, and the fact that we could, in discussion with the retailer, move to $70,000, which was half of their ask, we thought we vetted this very well. And we think, with your support tonight, that we'll have a attractive new building on that location. We'll have an attractive new business that fits all of our criteria that we've laid out as a city council in the past with our incentives. So that was my thinking. I think that was our collective thinking. I'll let my colleagues speak for themselves. And we'd ask for your support tonight for this incentive of $70,000 for the demolition and remodeling of this location. Thank you.
Okay. Any comments? Alderman Deuter.
Thank you, Mayor. If I can just start with a question. Earlier this year, we created some incentive programs that would be available in all of our TIF districts. Did the committee talk about which of those programs this applicant might be eligible for? And, you know, if so, can you just describe what they might be eligible for?
Alderman Honquist.
Thank you, Mayor. We did, and as part of our discussion, as you know, from a TIF perspective, we had to look at what would the incentive be specific for the TIF. And then in the discussion, we also said what other programs would be available. Starting in January, both the Black Iron incentive is available, as well as a retail grant. And what was the third one? And then the sign grant, which is small, $2,000, but they would be eligible. Those dollars added up to, was it $22,000. And as you all know, those individual programs are administered by city staff, and so they would apply for those. They were not part of we introduced those to the applicant. We did not get any discussion about whether they would get them or not get them. That's a separate process. We're simply focused on the demolition incentive and the TIF incentive, I should say. Number one, I just wanted to add too, because I'm looking at Alderman Dunn, the way this would work is this would be a $70,000 upfront investment. So we do have the money in the TIF, and it would be an upfront payment to the applicant as part of the project. Just to answer another question was asked of me. Thank you.
Any other questions? I'm done.
Just to follow up to what Alderman Honquist explained, and I think he did an excellent job of outlining the benefits of this project. Happy to get a business like this in the second ward, and I do think it's consistent with the North York plan. And the size of the incentive relative to the $3.7 million is rather small. One of the criteria in the TIF policy was a but-for criteria. Without this incentive, would the project go forward? But then there's also return on investment language also, and we use that in other TIFs. As Alderman Honquist mentioned, my question was, is this an upfront or is it pay-as-you-go? The pay-as-you-go projects were based on the increased EAV that this new property would bring, and those usually are preferable because there's really no risk as the property builds in value above the base. The incentive is paid out of that, and another modifier on that is a share. There's sometimes it's a 50-50 share on the increment, or 60-40, whatever the committee would decide. And we've used those in the past. But I think the committee did an excellent job of really looking at the benefit of this project. The $70K is about 2% of the overall value of the project. It's about, as Alderman Honquist mentioned, 1 year in sales tax incentive plus all the other benefits we get. I think they looked creatively at it to identify alternate sources of funding that just became available. So this is a good package for the project, and I'm completely supportive of it. Thanks.
Any additional comments? Alderman Plumsky.
Just two questions. Just want to confirm that there was no environmental remediation required. And when this was first under contract, was the former business still operating? Was it still a viable business?
What was the second question? Sorry.
I'm just trying to get an idea of, what's the possibility that this property would not be developed without our intervention? And I want to confirm if, when this first went under contract, if the former business was still operating.
Question, I don't think it was. Alderman Honquist?
Yes, there was not a discussion of environmental need. It was a restaurant before it was the Burger King location. And number two, it was closed. I don't know for how long, but the business was closed before the applicant came in.
Okay, any other comments? Alderman Lavin?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm a little bit skeptical of these particular kinds of applications. I'm been a very strong proponent generally of our incentive programs. I feel that sometimes people come to us when, and my concern is whether the money's really needed, And to do the business or to meet the return of investment, as opposed to a conclusion that, gee, it'd be really nice if we could get a contribution from the city, because it'll make it less costly for us to do the project. You'll recall when we did the ACE hardware incentive package, I voted against that, not because I didn't think it's not a good business. I think their store that they operated in Addison is one of the, as I said at the time, one of the best hardware stores you could ever visit, and I knew they would do a great job here in Elmhurst. We were giving some incentive already, so I voted against part of the incentive. In this case, I see a franchisee who's not saying, I want to open a business, and it's my first one, I'm trying to get it off the ground, and I'm struggling to make it. And you know, I'm a big supporter of small business. A lot of my clients are small business owners, so I understand it. And I would support that kind of application. I also understand we do some very large projects where you look at the bank financing and what's required, and it is not going to work without some sort of TIF incentive. My concern here is that we have a franchisee who owns 7 or 8 Culver's franchises, and the contract's already signed. I don't think this was one that was done with, depended upon TIF financing, and although they may have represented, and I wasn't there, that the return on investment wasn't sufficient, but I don't think a swing in this size project with this kind of contribution is one that is going to make it or break it in terms of the ability to do the project or to get the return on investment. So that's my concern. I'm listening to what other people are saying in terms of how I vote on it, but it's not for a lack of desirability of the business. Culver's is a very good franchise. It'd be a great addition to the city at that location. It's just a matter of whether it's appropriate for TIF funding.
Okay. Additional comments? Alderman Bram, have you spoken yet? I don't think you have. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I share the same concerns as Alderman Levin just voiced, so I'll keep it to 3 bullet points. My assessment is that it doesn't agree with the North York Corridor Plan. I've stated this on other projects in the area. The North York Corridor Plan states about consolidation of ingress and egress. This would not do so. That is one of the main parts that I think it does not coincide with the corridor plan. Alderman Levin already spoke about the financial need or feasibility. I don't see that, and even in the report, it states that they paid too much. The applicant allegedly paid too much for the land and as well as the demolition cost. Well, that doesn't mean that the city should provide TIF dollars because they were aggressive of getting this property. I don't blame them for it, but I don't know if that satisfies the requirements in our own TIF policy when it says that it definitely needs to have a financial need. So I think those, I'll just leave it at those two. I think those are the 2 biggest components from my perspective that draws concern. That I don't see the financial feasibility need here compared to some other projects, and I don't view it as in conjunction or agreeing with the corridor plan.
Alderman York.
Thank you, Your Honor. So I had conversations with Chairman Honquist and Vice Chair Toludo on this project, and I'm supportive of this. You know, we, as a council, spent quite a bit of time crafting a TIF incentive policy, and the fact that we're following the policy and this particular applicant has met the criteria on more than what's required as a baseline for this, I'm supportive. You know, I don't think there's a whole lot of projects that would move forward at 5 to 6% internal rate of return, so I think we're looking at pretty minimal numbers there. And I think the committee did a great job of all the information they had and everything, vetting it to come up with what I believe is a good incentive for this particular business in this particular place. It's going to have, I think, profound impact on all the other businesses around there as well, too. There's just, these restaurants create a lot of traffic, well, which can be a good thing and a bad thing, but economically, it's a good thing. I'm supportive. Thank you.
Alderman Brennan.
Thank you, Mayor. So Culver's does do a volume business, and I can guarantee that people from all over Elmhurst will be going to the restaurant. And to Alderman York's point, I think other merchants will benefit. There'll be, the Brennans will be going to Culver's. So, you know, there are a lot of stores up north that I don't get to. But I might, hey, let's go to Culver's and let's go to Mariano's. You know, there's a lot of combination of scenarios for a lot of families. You know, there are a lot of sporting activities up in that area. I think it really does benefit the community. Their food's very good. I do believe the committee was very thoughtful. I think it could be real easy to say, hey, you know, we really want Culver's, let's do the 140. It sounds like there's good debate and good reason to settle at the 70, therefore it has my support.
Alderman Deuter.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, I think our household, like others, are excited to see Culver's come to town. I think it's going to be a great addition. And it sounds like they looked in Elmhurst for a while. They had great interest. They found a site. I think it's a phenomenal location for them. And we heard a little bit about the TIF incentive programs and the up to $22,000 that the business can be eligible for. I think that's a generous incentive that the city makes available, and I would encourage and hope that this applicant applies for those. When I look at the TIF assistance above and beyond the programs that we make available to all the applicants in a TIF district, you know, I really look to see some type of extraordinary expense. You know, policy aside, it has to meet the criteria of the policy, but then beyond that, really what's making this unique and what's making this project require additional assistance. The applicant mentioned a higher than typical acquisition price. And in that case, it could be that it reflects our strong market and this good location. It could be that there's a stubborn seller. But I don't think it's the role of TIF to go in and subsidize the seller on the price that they're holding out for. The applicant also mentioned that they had the demo costs. Alderman Levin mentioned they have 8 other locations, and the information that they provided said that 5 of those 8 locations required demo and then new construction. So I don't think that the demolition costs really make this out of the ordinary for what a franchisee would expect for a site. So for those reasons, I am inclined to not support the committee's recommendation as much as I think this is going to be a great addition. And you know, on any project, if they're in a TIF district, I think we can expect that an applicant will come forward and ask for support. That's a savvy business person who, you know, looks for available resources and tries to get as much as possible. You know, we really have to drill down to figure out what's reasonable. A reduction is better than their full request. But I think, you know, as a council and city staff, we put a lot of emphasis and effort into recruiting businesses because we know that they're good for the city, whether it's a development that increases EAV or a business that brings in sales tax. That's why we emphasize attracting business. We know there are lots of benefits. I think we need to be careful using those benefits to justify additional investment. So I think the $22,000 that we make available is sufficient, and I'm not inclined to support anything above and beyond that.
Okay. Any other comments? Alderman Palomsky.
Thanks, Mayor. I was undecided on this one. I can see the benefits of it, and I greatly appreciate the committee coming to an agreement, and it isn't necessarily where anyone, or at least the consensus, was in the beginning. So I appreciate that. I want to say I fully support this business coming in. I think it does fit with our North Yard plan. I think it'll be a nice addition to the area, and I think it's a great business. In asking if I think I would be able to defend my vote by saying yes, I don't think they would develop without our assistance. I can't say that I believe that. I think that there likely is a way that this business would already develop that wasn't extraordinary cost because of environmental remediation needs. And it, you know, I understand there was a gap between the former business closing and this one, you know, being rebuilt, but it was a very short time. So I appreciate the committee's work, I support the business, and I do think it's fitting, but I cannot support the incentive. Thanks.
Okay. Alderman Bram.
Thank you. And since others have clarified, I want to clarify for myself as well. I don't have anything about Culver's moving into this location or any location. I have probably visited a Culver's too many times in that regard. There's mention in regards to, you know, this applicant meets the criteria in our own TIF policy. And I believe that is somewhat accurate. And reading from the TIF policy, what it does meet is for the applicant to be considered. And it says 2 of the following criteria, which is also in the report, must be met in order for incentive request to be considered. It's not a qualifier of if we should move forward with the incentive request. It's to state, should we even consider it? And then they have guidelines, and some of the aldermen have already spoke to, myself included, of those guidelines about should we approve the request. And the first one in that, and I've said this in past discussions, TIF assistance will not shall not could, should not, will not be provided to projects that have the financial feasibility, et cetera, et cetera. And some of my fellow aldermen have already stated that they do not feel, or they have not seen evidence that there is the financial need for this applicant, for these dollars stated in the recommendation in the report, to move forward and agree with this recommendation. And I feel the same way. Yeah, it should be considered according to our own TIF policy, but on that same page, it says that if there's not evidence for it to be, if the funds are not needed, then we will not provide these funds for assistance.
Any other comments? Clerk Cyprian, I'd ask you to call the vote.
Levin?
No.
Park?
Aye.
Conquest?
Aye.
Kennedy?
Aye.
Mulliner?
Aye.
Brennan?
Aye.
Sabatino?
Aye.
Deuter?
No?
Dunn?
Aye.
Leader?
Aye.
Palumski?
No.
Graham?
No.
Toledo?
Aye.
York?
Aye.
10 ayes, 4 nays.
10 ayes, 4 nays. Motion carries. Agenda item 6.15 is approved. On to agenda item 6.38. This is a resolution. I'd ask Clerk Cyprian to read the resolution.
A resolution to approve and authorize the execution of an intergovernmental agreement between the City of Elmhurst, Illinois, the County of Cook, the Illinois Toll Authority, and the City of North Lake for the County Line Road I-294 ramp to North Avenue Improvement Project.
Okay, to put this before council, I'll ask for a motion to approve the resolution as read. Motion by Alderman Deuter, second by Alderman Kennedy. Alderman Deuter, your motion.
Absolutely defer to the chairman.
Alderman Kennedy. The person that pulled it. All right, looks like it's over to you, Alderman Bram.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is in regards to the intergovernmental agreement between Elmhurst, Cook County, the Tollway Authority, et cetera, and the City of North Lake as well. 4 weeks ago? 4 weeks ago, we had the report before us. I made a request for this report to be pulled back to committee to get additional data and dig a little deeper and to move forward. That request at that time was denied because it was stated by the committee, or the majority of the committee, that there is an urgency to get this passed right away. I even made a recommendation that we could suspend the rules and still take care of it at the subsequent city council meeting, which would have been on 12/3, when the report was issued on 11/19 and discussed. Well, we're a month later, so obviously the urgency wasn't there, because it wasn't on the December 3rd city council agenda. It could have been discussed, and I believe that, all that aside, that this could have dire consequences to the surrounding residential area around Lake Street frontage and County Line Road. As I stated 4 weeks ago, it could end up to be the second Berthoud jug handle that we've seen in the city of Elmhurst, where we're inadvertently having traffic, expressway traffic, going through residential neighborhoods, cars, semis, et cetera. So I cannot support this. I think that more needs to be done before we move forward with this, and time was not allotted to have that further discussion, and therefore come up with something that I think would mitigate, if not eliminate, the potential of commercial traffic through the residential area.
Any other comments? Alderman Palomsky.
I just wanted to touch on what I mentioned at the last meeting where we discussed this, that the report before us is to discuss how responsibilities are allocated between the governing bodies. And what it's saying is that where the city will own the frontage road, where we're going to take on a third of the financial responsibility of maintenance, and responsibility of the cost of emergency vehicle preemption system. So that's what this is about. I have had some discussions with engineering about traffic, about access, and about what the anticipation is for traffic exiting. And that has been addressed on an ongoing basis, and that's not what this report is, but I approve of this ordinance. I support it.
Okay. Any other comments? Alderman Param.
Yeah, I agree with Alderman Palomsky's statement that what this is about in black and white on the report. But as city staff has said, and it has been discussed a month ago, that once this moves forward, there's no turning back. We give up any leverage that we would have to prevent a secondary Berthoud jug handle in the city of Elmhurst. So yes, black and white, that's what it is. It's about responsibility of the various roads. But once this moves forward, we have no leverage. We have very little, if any, ability to control what traffic would come through the residential area of the city of Elmhurst.
Okay, any other comments? Clerk Cyprian.
Levin,
Aye.
Park,
Aye.
Conquest,
Aye.
Kennedy,
Aye.
Mulliner, Brennan,
Aye.
Sabatino,
Aye.
Deuter,
Aye.
Dunn,
Aye.
Leader,
Aye.
Palomsky,
Aye.
Graham,
No?
Saludo,
Aye.
York.
Aye.
13 ayes, 1 nay, 0 absent.
13 ayes, 1 nay, 0 absent. Motion carries. Agenda item 6.38 is approved. Agenda item 7, reports and recommendations of appointed elected officials. Mayor Morley, that's me. Real quick tonight. Our last meeting of the year. It's been an honor and a pleasure during this year to work with my fellow elected officials. It's been an honor and a pleasure to work with city staff. And it's been my honor, and I am truly humbled, to work on behalf of the residents of my hometown of Elmhurst. And I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. City Manager.
Thank you. And also on behalf of staff, I also want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. Nothing else.
Very good. Any other reports or recommendations? Seeing none, I'll go on to ordinances. 8.1. I'd ask Clerk Cyprian to read the ordinance.
Budget appropriation ordinance for the city of Elmhurst for the fiscal year beginning January 1, 2019, and ending December 31, 2019.
Okay, to put this before council, I'll ask for a motion to approve the ordinance as read. Motion by Alderman York, second by Alderman Bram. Alderman York.
Thank you, Your Honor. So I don't really have any prepared comments. I'd just like to say thanks to city staff, all the department heads, and for everybody at the dais to take a ton of time to review this document. There was a lot of time. People can't even imagine the amount of time that gets put into this document by city staff, and it's warranted and it's deserved, and we come up with a good plan to operate the city by with this document. So I would ask for everybody's support. I would like to just remind everybody that the 2019 budget includes a transfer of $1.8 million from the general fund to the stormwater fund that's designated for property acquisitions. And if you recall, during the circle back item review, the proposed 2019 budget amount of an additional $500,000 for property acquisitions funded by the general fund was removed by motion. The budget amount of $1.8 million reflects a reduction of this $500,000. I'd also like to note that based on our past practices, funds are only transferred when they're from the general fund to the stormwater fund when there's an identified property that is actually purchased. So based on the committee of the whole budget deliberations and the recent discussion held at our committee last week, I would like to make the following motion, and everybody has a copy of the motion in front of them. So this is a motion to, you made one for yourself. Motion to amend the 2019 budget, ordinance 0-83-2018, increasing the general fund transfer to stormwater fund, account number 110-0098-515-9839, on page 18 of the ordinance by $500,000 from $1.8 million to $2.3 million. This will also increase the stormwater fund transfer from general fund, account number 305-40-391-0100, on page 34 of the budget ordinance by the identical $500,000, from $1.8 million to $2.3 million. Unlike the current transfer of the $1.8 million, which is designated for property acquisitions, the additional transfer of the new funds in the amount of $500,000 should be transferred in the first quarter of 2019 and designated for debt service and/or stormwater improvement project expenses at the discretion of the Public Works and Building Committee upon approval by the City Council. Those funds will remain in the stormwater fund until such time that they are fully utilized.
We have a motion as read. Do I have a second? Alderman Honquist. That's a motion to amend as read. Motion by Alderman York, second by Alderman Honquist.
Point of order.
Yes.
I understand the underlying, but the additional, I don't know, criteria as part of this motion, is that appropriate for a motion for a budget document?
Sure. It's just like a motion that we would have made during our budget.
Well, a budget
our committee of the
document
whole.
would just be manipulating the numbers in one way or another, right? I think there's added criteria to this.
There is added criteria, and that's, you're voting on that as well. I think there's a line item change, a couple of line item changes, but also a designation of what the motion wants to do with that money. So I think it's appropriate. So basically, let me summarize. During our budget meetings, a motion was made to remove $500,000 that was designated for home buyouts. And the result of that motion was to remove those stormwater dollars completely from the budget. Basically what this motion does is takes that $500,000, because, I don't want to speculate, it takes that $500,000 that was removed from the budget, that was designated for home buyout, and it puts it back into the stormwater fund in general. I talked to Alderman York, it's his belief that there's certainly plenty of stormwater needs, and that money can be used to support those needs. Fair statement?
Yes.
Okay, so that's a motion and a second. So basically, adding $500,000 back into the stormwater bucket for use. Comments or questions? Alderman Deuter.
Thank you, Mayor. I strongly support this motion. I appreciate the committee's attention to kind of putting this back into an appropriate bucket for it, and Alderman York's attention to it. I think in making the motion a couple weeks ago when we talked about the buyout, really was just to stop the continued kind of addition of funds to grow that buyout fund. But we absolutely have projects and needs in stormwater, so I think putting these dollars back in stormwater reflects that it's still a strong priority for the city and that we're not done with that issue yet.
Any other comments? Alderman Toledo.
Thank you, Mayor. The question that I would have, since this will be an overall increase of 500,000 back to what was originally recommended, I think, by staff when they presented the budget, will this change the tax levy recommendation?
No, in fact, it's after the fact.
Right,
So tax levy's already been passed. What this would have resulted in was a general fund that was $500,000 higher. So, yes, follow up.
So then our projection, will the projection of our general fund balance at the end of 2019 still be within our policy range?
Actually, I think it's still a little bit above it. That 25 to 33 is still a little bit above it, even with this reduction.
Even with this addition?
Additional spend reduction out of the general fund.
Thank you.
On 11.
Thank you. I do also support this, and I think it's very appropriate. I do think what is not appropriate is what the additional language that Alderman Bram highlighted, being that language that begins with, at the discretion of the Public Works and Building Committee. I feel that this is our budget document, it's the council's budget document. If the council itself or through some other committee, however it gets to the council, that is how changes are made. I don't think it's appropriate to have a line item under the control of any particular committee. So I would move to strike from the proposed language everything beginning with "at the discretion" to the end of the paragraph.
Fantastic. So we have a motion to amend, which everybody knows under our code 2 something something X. Motions to amend shall be in order. However, any motion to amend shall have to be acted upon. Another motion to amend shall not be in order. So we're done amending. We have a motion to amend the motion to amend, which is the removal of the last 3 lines of the written motion before you, striking everything after project expenses. So at the discretion, striking all of that. So do I have a second for this motion to amend the motion to amend? Second by Alderman Bram. Discussion. Alderman Dunn.
There's 2 documents in this agenda item. One is the budget ordinance, the other is the carryover. I want clarification. Would the carryover document need to be edited as well to reflect this change? Because the initial budget had the $500,000 in for property buyout. I think there was an adjustment on that carryover and budget adjustment document. Do we need to modify that as well?
No, it's not needed. This is a different line item, according to staff, the way it was set up. I know that Alderman York worked with staff to make sure the line items were appropriately identified, but no, it's not back into that one line item, it's in a different line item. Does that make sense?
Okay. My next point is the council approved a budget and with stormwater, many stormwater items in there. The $500,000 line item was, as Alderman Deuter mentioned, beginning to pile up, and it was recognized that it might be a good idea just to toe the line on that one this year. So I don't agree with identifying a new $500,000 and just trying to move that into a stormwater fund without as an augmentation to the budget. I think we approved the stormwater projects along with all the other activity in the budget. So to have this new $500,000 appear and move it into that, I don't quite agree with that, so I don't support the motion.
Okay, additional comments? Alderman Toledo.
Regarding the motion to amend the motion, I think I got that right, regarding striking at the discretion, blah, blah, blah. I'd like to understand the intent of the original motion maker. I suspect that the intent is that, just like any other budget line items, whether they're TIF funds or whether they're ambulance, fire funds, that different committees have control, if you will, to vet the use of those funds, to recommend then to the city council that those funds get spent. I believe that that is what the intent of that statement referenced. If I could just get confirmation of the intent, that would be helpful for me. Thank you.
Alderman York, you want to provide some reasoning why you added the last statement?
Well, thank you, Your Honor. Again, as you had mentioned, I did speak with city staff about this. So to Alderman Toledo's question, that's exactly why we added it, because this is all kind of been, we're using a lot of puns around here, funneled through the Public Works and Buildings Committee. All this type of work is through there. So that's why the language is such that it is, and somebody suggested we say upon approval by the city council. The biggest thing that, I was trying to accomplish, and we talked about at our committee and everything, was to get this $500,000 out of the general fund, because we continue to have a general fund that is above policy guidelines. Yet, we know that we have work to do, and work costs money. So the whole idea was to get the $500,000 out of the general fund and into the stormwater fund. Well, we know, based on our debt service schedules, that we have 19 to 20 years worth of stormwater debt to sink. No pun intended. So that gives us one opportunity to use this money, or we can use it for a project that just might happen to come up, or some need that related to a stormwater project. So that was really the intention. There's nothing nefarious about this or anything like that, and it's just, saying, hey, Public Works and Buildings Committee, make a decision and let the city council know what you want to do, and we'll have a vote on it.
Okay. Additional comments? Alderman Palomsky.
I have a question. I don't know if I can, it sort of goes around the rules. I want to know if we could hear from our city attorney, if there's a need to do this, if we leave this remainder of the sentence in, or I guess from at the discretion, and then the next sentence, is that an issue? Do you have recommendations for us?
I don't have a recommendation. I don't think it's an issue.
Alderman Deuter.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate, as far as this second motion, I appreciate the intent of the language at the end of the paragraph. But it might very well be that it's not necessary to include, because I think this is the same practice we use with all the dollars to be spent in the budget. So I think the motion, if that is, makes it tighter and makes it more appropriate for the budget document, I think it's fine. I think we're very clear on the intent. And just to one of the other points that was made earlier, these dollars would not be used for any additional project that's not already accounted for in the budget. We have projects in the stormwater projects identified, whether it's their debt service or, we have the expense there, but we do not, in a few different cases, have a source of revenue to cover that expense. So, when I say we have the projects and we know the expense is coming, again, the expense is there, the source of revenue is not, whether it's for debt service or, some of the bigger projects. So I think we're not increasing our spending by moving these dollars, we're just allowing for these dollars to be spent for the projects that we have already identified.
Anyone hasn't spoken yet on this? Alderman Leader, you had your hand up? Okay, that's a no. Alderman Levin?
I'm only speaking on the
Motion to
amendment.
amend, the motion to amend.
Exactly, and I don't think, I think there is a slight procedural danger in saying it's okay to do this. I disagree that it's appropriate because we could, as a council, could decide to do something completely different with this money, and we are legislatively saying it has to come through Public Works, which it doesn't. So it's, when I say it's not appropriate, I mean that the council can do whatever it wants with this money, and if it comes from Public Works, that's fine, but it may come from somewhere else. I just think it's not a good technical way to do it.
Alderman Brand?
Thank you. Yeah, I obviously agree with Alderman Levin. My other concern was actually a couple, or a sentence above that, actually stipulating, and that was my initial point, stipulating when it should be done and what it should be utilized for. I think, you know, everything above that point, or those points, is fine, but saying at what quarter, what time, what committee does this, I don't feel that that is a part of the budget process, or for that matter, the budget document. To be stating that this will occur in the first quarter and be designated for one of these two expenses. We do designate things for various expenses in the budget, but saying when and when and how, I guess, we'll be doing that, I don't think is appropriate.
Okay, any other comments? I'll now ask for the vote on the motion to amend, the motion to amend, which in layman terms is striking the last 2.5 sentences, starting at the discretion. Clerk Cyprian?
Levin?
Aye.
Park?
Aye.
Conquest?
No.
Kennedy?
Nope.
Mulliner?
No.
Brennan?
No.
Sabatino?
No.
Deuter?
Aye.
Dunn?
Aye.
Leader?
No.
Palumski?
No.
Graham?
Aye.
Ludo?
No.
York?
No.
5 ayes, 9 nays, 0 absent.
5 ayes, 9 nays. Motion to amend fails. On the underlying motion to amend, which is the written document we have before us. Additional comments or questions? Alderman Dunn.
I just want to clarify the net effect of what happened in the past few weeks and tonight. At the budget meetings, we removed a $500,000 expenditure, so we were not adding additional funds to the property buyout program, leaving it at 1.8 million instead of 2.3 million. This motion will increase the expenditure that we're at now by $500,000. So in essence, we are raising our budget expenditure by $500,000 right here, with not an exact sense of what we're going to do, exactly what project that's for. It's you know, a general need for stormwater. So I just wanted to clarify that we took it out, now we're putting $500,000 back in.
Yep.
Okay.
Any other comments? Clerk Cyprian?
Levin?
Aye.
Park?
Aye.
Conquest?
Aye.
Kennedy?
Aye.
Mulliner?
Aye.
Brennan?
Aye.
Sabatino?
Aye.
Deuter?
Aye.
Dunn?
No.
Leader?
Aye.
Palumski?
Aye.
Graham?
No.
Paludo?
Aye.
York?
Aye.
12 ayes, 2 nays.
12 ayes, 2 nays, motion carries. Motion to amend is approved. We've amended the motion. We have to vote on the ordinance as amended. Any final comments? Clerk Cyprian?
Levin?
Aye.
Park?
Aye.
Conquest.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Brennan.
Aye.
Sabatino.
Aye.
Deuter.
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
Palomski.
Aye.
Graham.
No.
Saludo.
Aye.
York.
Aye.
13 ayes, 1 nay.
13 ayes, 1 nay. Motion carries. 8.1, budget is approved. On to agenda item 9, resolutions. 9.1, this was put on the agenda in anticipation that all of our paperwork was going to be in order. It is not in order, so it would be inappropriate to vote on this at this time. I am pulling it from the agenda. Agenda item 10, other business. Any other business? Alderman Honquist.
Delay there. Since I'm raising cash tonight, I would, thought I would also, for businesses, I thought I'd do it for charity. There's a trivia night at the Elmhurst Yorkfield Food Pantry, which is a great Sixth Ward charity. And they are having it on Saturday, January 19th at 7 o'clock. Trivia starts at 8 at the Knights of Columbus. $25 person, $250 a table, maximum 10 seats, and limited seating. So hurry and get your tickets. A light dinner will be included. All here for details. Thank you,
Very
Mayor.
nice. Any other business? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Alderman Mulliner, second by Alderman Sabatino. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned.